Hello, everyone. This is Michaela, and you're listening to the End All the Things podcast. As a life coach and facilitator, I work with individuals and groups to empower their best selves to shine to the betterment of all involved. My goal is always to bring you closer to trusting the voice inside of you that is authentically yours. My job here is no different. In my journey through life, I continue to meet people who use their authenticity, their gifts, to grow, change, and serve through professional and personal endeavors. These people and their stories become my gift to you, for I cannot keep a good thing to myself, and I believe that they may inspire a part of your story to evolve. Hey, joining me today is Corey Hennings. He is the host of the Sober by Design podcast. Corey, as you will find, is a calm, gentle giant of resilience and inspiration. As we explore his personal journey with alcoholism, we will unravel the intricate layers of his life beyond sobriety. Through candid conversations, as you can totally expect here on And All the Things, Corey shares really the profound impact of alcohol on his personal and his professional life, before, during, and after. And what we learn is how he highlights the pivotal role of authenticity, self-reflection, and community in his path to recovery. And that's a path that you and I can follow too. We talk about the significance of therapy and, again, community, but really all of that comes down to our willingness to be vulnerable. And then from that place of vulnerability, to put in self-care practices that help you get closer to your goals. So we talk about generational trauma. We talk about living life in corporate America as a sober person and how we can bring non-alcoholic alternatives into the workplace. We talk about resources. We talk about all manner of things to help you and me get closer to our relationship with our inner self so that we're not looking to external things like alcohol, substances, sex, drama, shopping, and all the things. So whether you are sober curious like me, or you're on your own journey with or towards sobriety, this conversation is an invitation for you to take one step further on your journey to self-discovery and transformation. So without further ado, I offer you Corey Hennings and All the Things. All right, friends, it is an honor today to introduce you to Corey Hennings and All the Things. So I met Corey through my husband, who is a master networker. He's always all over the place, and I have to admit, he's quite a lovable guy. And he came home one day and said, "Babe, you got to meet this guy, Corey. He's a friend of mine. He's doing XYZ, but he's got this podcast he's starting. And you have a podcast, and you two should talk." And I said, "Absolutely." So we connected over a podcast. But Corey, tell us about your podcast, Sober by Design, and what role is it playing in your life that at a networking event, that's what comes up in conversation?
Yeah. First off, thank you for having me on the podcast. Yeah, so I started the Sober by Design podcast last year, in February, I think I started, and it really kind of spun out of my work as a recovery coach in my local community. I was coaching people one-on-one after they spent some time in the ED and probably had the worst day or night of their life.
And
And
ED for our listeners
oh,
is,
so emergency department at the local hospital up the road. So I'm part of an organization that works in our county, and I can get into a little bit more of the coaching and what that is. But really, what was going on was I was meeting these people in the emergency room, working with them for about 8 weeks, and trying to help them find a path in recovery. What was happening is I was spending and I still do the work, by the way. But I'm spending a lot of time with that one person, and it's hard to make a big impact in any world when it's a one-on-one sort of relationship, right?
you
Is
make a big impact in their one world,
right, but
but
like a
there's buckets full of people who are struggling to take that step towards recovery.
Right, right. So I was doing a lot of one-on-one work. I felt like I could use an hour or 2 hours of my life a week and maybe reach more people.
Mhm.
And I am an avid podcast listener. I've been listening for years. I started out with like true crime podcasts and listened to,
Oh, so good.
yeah. I think I've listened to like every single true crime podcast, at least the big
Okay.
ones.
You might have to share your favorites at the end.
I will. I will. So I just love the medium. I think it's a great medium to connect with people. And I put, sort of an intention down and just acted on it, bought the equipment, got the RSS feed up and just started recording. And the reason is again to sort of spread the word of recovery, sort of look deeper into why people maybe have challenges around substances, and maybe have some folks question, their relationship with be it alcohol, sugar, love, food. I've talked about
Mhm.
just about everything on my podcast at this point. So,
Well, and I think that's the common denominator. Being a person that I'm vegetarian curious, I'm sober curious, I'm curious about wherever I can go to build a stronger relationship with myself,
mhm,
right? And alcohol is one of those things, and we're certainly going to talk about that today because I had to really challenge my belief about the relationship, my awareness about the relationship, so that I could put it in a way that made sense to me, didn't hurt me, and was productive at the same time. But that's not always easy, right? So when you think about recovery, one of the things we talked about before is it's not just from the substances. You mentioned it's from love. I told you I think I have an addiction to Audible and podcasts. Like
mhm.
I really could admit that there's a problem there. Now, what is the problem? What is the risk benefit? What is it impacting? Is it time for change? These are all the things I've learned to ask myself, but we don't think about those little smaller details. So when I hear you talk about recovery, I know you're talking about substance abuse in particular, but for our listeners, we're talking about the relationship we have with the things outside of ourselves, right? We're talking about our money, we're talking about our careers, our children, our partners. Um, I mean, and don't let me put words in your mouth. Would you say that that is where we are with this, that we're so widespread and and yet we only think about the need for recovery with substances? Maybe not only, maybe that's a harsh generalization, but we
No,
tend
you're,
there.
yeah, no, you're right. I think that most people will look and say, recovery is sort of, there's like three things I think that people really kind of bucket into recovery, right? Alcohol, drugs, and, smoking, right? Like those
Mhm.
tend to be the three that people really look at.
Right.
I think there's another layer under that that is now probably a little bit more focused on, which is like the food and the love and the sex. And then
Mhm.
there's all these other underlying ones.
Right.
And social media too, I think is really creeping up to the top.
Yep.
Um, and one that I really focus on more and more. What I've always said is for me, it's always about trying to regulate some inside feeling with an external source. Like
Hmm.
is what I'm trying to fix, right? If I'm using any
Right.
to regulate how I feel inside with something from outside of me, then it's probably I got something going on and I got to look at it. And that could be sugar, that
Yeah.
could be reading, that could be
Consuming. What are we
yeah,
consuming?
shopping, right? Shopping's a big one too. Like
Yep.
people just, I feel bad, I'm gonna go buy something.
Shop
Um,
therapy, as it's called.
yeah, and it does feel really good
Yes.
in that moment. And then afterwards, it's like, ah, did I need that? There's like a bit of regret.
Yep.
And that's sort of, if you're feeling that thing afterwards, it probably wasn't the right move. Yeah.
Right. That's the hedonic adaptation where we buy the new iPhone and it's like fireworks are erupting
Mhm.
for like a day and a half. And then it's like being schlepped over here and dropped over there and the value of it changes. So when I work with my coaching clients, and this might align with where you are, but if you want to stop smoking, don't do anything right now, right? As long as we're not in harm's way, right? Like so
Mhm.
disclaimer. But before you smoke that cigarette, what is your intention? What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? During it, what happens? And then after, did you get the desired result? How long did it last? So that we can collect data to weigh where we are with that experience. Um, because we're not engaged. We're moving so fast, I think, in our life today that we're creating room for all these other things to creep up to that list of addictive substances and sources. Um, Social media, sex, love, debt, all of it.
Yeah.
So is this just something you walked into? Are you the guy that just said, I'm going to help these people? Or how did you get to that place? Because I know there's a story back there.
No, no, that I did not just walk into this. So I myself obviously didn't just decide one day to become a recovery coach because I'm just some
Right.
altruistic human who just, lives for other people. Session.
Well, I would
But
say you're a very altruistic human, no matter how you got there. So
yeah.
you can stick that in your pocket.
Now, now I might be, but there was a version of me that started when I was 18, where I really found alcohol. I had grown up with an alcoholic parent. I swore I never would drink, and then it found me. And I've told the story on my podcast, but as soon as I drank, I kind of knew it was a problem. But I kind of pushed that off and I
What
continued.
what were those kind of new thoughts? Like I kind of knew because I think this is important for our listeners, right? Like it starts very well, and again, I don't want
Yeah.
to fill the blanks, but it starts innocently and honestly, or maybe not honestly, but I don't know. What were those battling thoughts? And I'm going to think about my own too.
So, I mean, at that age, it's tricky, right? So at 18, it's hard to understand that it's a problem because I was in college and, there was a culture around me of drinking parties.
Hmm.
Everybody kind of did it to an extreme at that point. But my extreme was maybe just a little bit different. I would show up at a party and there'd be beer, but I had to make sure that I brought something else
Mm.
with me. Um, it was drinking to blackout. It was, starting at you know, 4 on a Wednesday afternoon, right? Just because. So there were little telltale signs early on. And I would say that that sort of continued on from 18 to, I guess I was like 35 when I got sober. I'd have to actually do the math on my age. I know
A
2012 when I found my sobriety, but
lot of time. There was a
yeah,
lot of time and dedication to
there was
that
a decent
relationship.
amount of drinking in
Yeah.
in that time, and there was a lot of ups and downs and different, and there was always this idea that the relationship with alcohol was wrong, right? I was drinking after people went to bed. I was drinking alone. I would drink, again, to excess.
Mhm.
I would get myself in very bad situations. um you know but but I also was able to maintain a job.
Right.
I never got kicked out of a home. I never got in a car accident. There was all these things that didn't happen
Right.
that kind of allowed me to say, well, it's not a real problem up until the very end when I could tell that my marriage was taking a hit.
Mm.
It was very clear. I had gone to marriage counseling and, we went through there, and in therapy, there was a lot of talk about my drinking, and I would always explain it away, and it was something else. It was some other problem. It was, a job, or it was the bills, or it was, my wife, or whoever, or whatever it was. It was not the drinking.
Putting
Got
it on an external thing, something outside of you that was happening to you,
right. Yeah.
right? That, of course, I'm going to respond this way. Of course, it's 5 o'clock, right?
Yeah. And I never wanted to give it up. It was part of me. I really felt like alcohol was a part of me. Like I would not be the same person without it.
Hmm.
But at the end, it was bad. And, we did the couples therapy. We got through that. We found some strength in our marriage, but I continued to drink. And that was all the other things had kind of been, fixed. The only thing that remained was my drinking. And towards the end, it was very clear that that was the problem. It was just up to me to determine if and when I was going to stop. And I did stop, and it was the day after my wife's birthday. We had had a party at our home, and I had started cooking and drinking early, and I think I passed out, you know, 3 o'clock in the
Mhm.
afternoon at our party, and
I'm
I
sure
woke
that went over very well.
went over off went over awful. I remember
Uh,
waking up at some point, seeing her, I think, and then in the morning when I woke up, she wasn't in our bed. At that point, we had my two boys. My older son was 6 at the time, and my younger one was just about 1. And I woke up, I took a shower, I went to work, and I just said, I can't do this. I think in the shower, I said, I can't do this anymore. And
mhm.
I went to a AA meeting, and I just
Wow.
continued going to AA meetings for months every day at lunchtime. And it wasn't like a magic bullet, right? It didn't fix my marriage like the third day that I went.
Right.
But
There are no magic bullets,
right.
unfortunately.
But it was time, and it was a lot of self-reflection and change. And I could say over those past 12 years or so, I'll be approaching 12 years. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And,
Yeah.
I think that what it's prompted me to do is really change who I am, and do that self-reflection of like, how am I utilizing this thing in my life?
Hmm.
And what is it doing? And, that's kind of what I talk about on my podcast now, more so than just, alcohol or drug recovery. It's like,
Hmm.
how are we becoming better versions of ourselves? And, you know, w- what are those substances doing for us? And yeah, that's my story. So that's how I got.
Incredible.
And just to fig so why I became a recovery coach was about, I think, 4 or 5 years into my journey. My mom passed away, and she had found sobriety, actually. So she was about 23 years sober when
Wow.
she passed. And
And was she the alcoholic parent
yeah,
in
she
your
was.
dynamic? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So she died in 2017. And it was a tough loss. Put a lot of just like hard energy into our family, and I didn't know what to do with some of that energy. And I started working out at some point, and then I also decided to go volunteer at my local recovery center. And then through that volunteerism, I became a recovery coach, and then that kind of spun out the podcast.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What a story. And what I think is important, let's talk about the blessing that you didn't have a catastrophic impact, right? No one essentially got hurt, right? Everyone is still here together in this family dynamic, working through it. Um, and you talk about therapy, you did the work to get there. But I imagine that finding that sobriety is something that you chose in one day. But I have to imagine that the conversation of, am I okay? What am I doing? How long had that conversation been happening for you? Because I think it all builds up to that place of being able to say, today's the day, damn it, no more. I will not do it in this way.
Yeah, so that's contemplation, right? And that is a
Yeah.
big part of most people's recovery story. Mine probably span back to uh 2004. So you're talking 2004 to 2012.
Wow.
Yeah, so
So
8 years. And there was like I did try AA in there, and I had some things, and it never rose to the level of that day.
because it's all in the timing. Hey, hey there, amazing listeners of And All the Things. Thank you for being on this journey with me. The fact that you're still here, I have to assume this podcast has sparked your curiosity, encouraging you to think of life beyond your current boundaries. Now it's time to take that energy and channel it into a transformative journey where boundless joy awaits. Introducing The Course for Joy, brought to you by Joy Enterprises and me, Michaela, your joy coach. Life gets busy, I get it, but self-care matters and should not take a back seat. That is why we've crafted a 4-week self guided adventure to seamlessly fit into your routine. In just 15 minutes, a few times each week, our enlightening video lessons and engaging workbooks will guide you through self discovery and bring you closer to growth. As a special bonus, when you enroll in the Course for Joy, you'll receive an exclusive 50-minute live coaching session. We'll celebrate your progress and create a roadmap for your journey ahead. Are you ready to paint your life with vibrant joy and purpose? Visit myjoycoach.com/course to learn more about the transformative Course for Joy. Let's amplify your joy and ignite your purpose together. Stay tuned for more inspiration and insights right here on And All the Things. Change doesn't happen overnight, right? Like we think, oh, I decided this, I need it to be better in 3 days, or, I've been pondering this, contemplating this for 8 years. I'm never going to do. We have to still play with the idea of giving ourselves, flexing the muscle a little bit of, is this okay? Is this hurting me? How is this? And I can say for myself, I probably had been contemplating my role, my relationship with alcohol for a very long time.
Mhm.
But as you said, it was a part of me, right? And there used to be a time in my life where I felt great pride when someone would say that I can drink all that, she drinks like a man, or, things that boost, make it cool that I was drinking a lot. Now, I have not labeled myself. I probably never will, but I know that at some point I was embarrassed by that. I didn't want to be the girl that could drink all that. But I still was that girl, right? I had to keep my persona identity. But as I grew older and my body has changed and my metabolism and my liver enzymes, I began to not handle it. And I got scared. I was like, what do I, what do you mean I can't drink? Of
Mhm.
course I can have 2 glasses of wine and wake up tomorrow and go to work and live my life. And by all accounts, I'm a highly productive human being, right? I do all the things and it looks fine. But I could see where it was wearing on the relationship with my family. I
Mhm.
could see where my short temper, my fatigue, my just distractedness began to influence my family. So it became deeper contemplation, right? And now, I mean, I still drink and I want at this point in my life to be able to, but I can see it in a way that I feel more control over, right? It's not something like, oh my gosh, it's 4 o'clock, I have to have the drink. It's, I don't really want the drink. But it took working with my coach, who is essentially, I mean, I've been with her for years. She's my healer, my therapist, my everything. It took reading books, right? So one I'd like to recommend, for all the women out there is what is it? Quit Like a Woman, Holly Whitaker's
Whitaker.
book.
Yeah,
Yep. Phenomenal. I mean, it's hardcore.
it
There's a
is.
lot of opinion in there about, the patriarchy and
Mhm.
society, but her information is great. And just putting myself in those places, changing my conversation, throwing away all those beautiful mugs that were like mommy wine time, and they're all gone, right? But I'm also watching. My best friend is now sober for 3 years. Kudos to you, girlfriend,
Mhm.
right? Like I'm watching this trend. So let's bring in another part of you. I met you through my husband, Chris,
Yeah.
through business networking. In your other role, please share with us what you do if you'd like, but I know what networking historically is. You
Mhm.
meet, happy hour, cocktails, everyone goes home a little tipsy. What did we really accomplish? I don't know. How does that relationship change for you? So tell us about your corporate role and how are you managing 12 years of networking sober?
Yeah. So in my other life, I'm in design and construction. I work for a large firm, international firm. I've managed to kind of crawl up the ranks, and now I'm some sort of executive. Uh, I
Say
don't
that with some pride.
I
Come
don't
on.
wear the
It's
title. I
a
don't
big
wear the title
deal.
well. I never imagined myself in this place, even though I did
Mhm.
work and all the schooling. It just never felt like something that I would be able to get to, right? But I've gotten a good amount of traction in my industry.
Hmm.
Um, early on in my career, I think that in a lot of industries, I will say alcohol plays a big part in
Right.
sort of the corporate culture, right? It's going out to work or out to drinks after work. And, that was a big problem for me early in my career. I just kind of did it. And,
Well,
if,
that's the expectation.
yeah,
That
it's
certainly
the
was by
expectation.
and large.
Yeah. And, I didn't feel very empowered, to say no. And
Hmm.
it got me in a lot of trouble and, probably really added to my drinking story.
Well, and it's also like confirmation bias when everybody around you is doing the same thing,
Yeah.
right? When you look around you and that guy's doing it and he's getting up for work and he's not having problems with his wife that you know of,
Yeah.
right? But you get this sense that and if you look at the media, if you look at all forms coming at us, it's telling us that drinking is cool, it's the way to go. Yes, do it responsibly, but bottoms up.
Yeah. So for me, up until I stopped drinking, I was doing a lot of those networking events and going out and living that life. And it was the evening events. And then as soon as I started in my recovery path, going to AA meetings, I just kind of shut a bunch of it down. For me, it was just like a clean break.
Mhm.
My career at that point, I had at that point I was in private industry. I had actually a really good job. And then I think 6 months into my sobriety, I quit. Um,
Hmm.
for a multitude of reasons. And I just kind of scaled back what I was doing a little bit. Um, took a backward step in my career. And
Maybe a sidestep,
it
right?
was backwards. It
Because
was a
we're
little bit.
always moving forward in some way or another.
Yeah, looking back, it felt very backwards, but it was what I needed to do at the
Yeah,
time, right? A lot of what I was doing in that early recovery was what I needed to do. And as I got more sort of recovery time under my belt, I was able to go back out. Early in that process of networking, it was a lot of just breakfasts and
right.
lunches. Um, and I was very selective with where I would go at night. Um,
Well, you have
now,
to create a space that's safe for you, where you feel empowered, as you use that word, to live out the person you want to be, which means
yeah.
changing behaviors and patterns and such.
Yeah, and the other thing that I found early on too is like I really enjoyed the idea of accountability in my sobriety. So if somebody knew I was not drinking, to me that was one more person I was accountable to.
Okay.
So for me, very early on, I was just to wrap it back to Holly, I was starting to listen to podcasts, and at that time, Holly had a podcast with Laura McCowan
Hmm.
and the Home podcast, which was something that I listened to sort of constantly in my early recovery, and they were sharing their stories publicly.
Right.
And I had found sort of sober Instagram, and people were sharing their stories
Right.
out loud. And so what I found is like in my professional space, I would just start to tell people I don't drink anymore. And it kind of cut the nonsense out. There was
Mhm.
there was and there remains maybe a handful of people who continue to try to convince me that today's the
Really?
day. Yeah, it's like,
You
but
know, and listen, I get it, right? Someone's like, oh, I'm not drinking. Oh, just one. Because they need that confirmation
right.
bias. They need, and this was going to be one of my questions, how do you come out of the I'm now sober closet, for lack of a better word, and then deal with other people's, if you choose to deal with them. But if someone, when my best friend said to me, I'm going sober, I internally felt judged. She was
Mhm.
not judging. Well, she might have been, but she wasn't judging me. But it was does that mean I'm bad? Does that mean I'm doing something wrong? No, you can't do that. And obviously that was a very fleeting, very short-lived moment, right? But that I think is what happens because I want that confirmation bias, right? Or some thing.
Yeah. For me again, it was very early on. I used it as a tool. So just coming out and telling people that I didn't drink anymore became a tool for me. Just one more, right? In my early recovery, it was like showing up to the lunchtime meetings with a bunch of retirees, and then soon after starting to just tell anybody that I could that I wasn't drinking anymore. Those became very like foundational to
Yeah.
who I was. And like the old people meeting was like the community. And then I had the accountability. And then, there were some other things that I started to sprinkle in. But so for me, just telling the story was kind of like easy at that point. Dealing with a little bit of that, like, hey, you could drink stuff was challenging at the start. Now I just kind of just blow right by it.
That's
I
on
don't
them. Yeah.
stress it. Yeah, like that's not my thing to worry about. Um, I think that, yeah, people do maybe feel judged in that moment, but I don't know. I think they also just want you to be a part of what they're
They're
doing,
doing.
right? That's
It is
it.
such a social thing, right?
Yeah.
And I have spoken with a lot of people who have gone through their own recovery, and it's that fear of, am I me without this? Will I be accepted without this? How do I show up without this? So when you do the coaching work with the people you're working with in the community, how do you get them there to that place of, I mean, and I know they're in the emergency department, so they're already in a tough spot probably. But how do you get them to that place of I'm willing to try to see who I am without this?
Yeah, it's tricky. So my program that I coach in is different than say a long-term program that somebody's sort of committed to and
Sure.
determined on their own and maybe put some money towards. Mine is a free program to them. It is an emergent situation and they might not have any interest, right? So sometimes they just say, forget it, I don't want to work with you.
Is it mandatory or optional?
Totally optional, right?
Okay.
It's just a service that's provided. Over time, my role has changed a little bit in my organization in that I get people who are maybe looking for it. At least they're contemplating at that point. So I've been my the people I work with have changed over time. Early on, some of it was just being an ear for the people. Like you could tell very early on that they had no interest in changing, right? And there was like a lot of complaining, and in those instances, a lot of times I would just remind them, I'm here to help you with recovery. I'm not just like a sounding board for, how to find a new apartment
All
or
your things, right? I'm not a social worker,
right.
right? Like I can point you there, but I'm here to talk particularly about recovery.
Yeah. So I think now, again, with people who are a little bit more contemplative about it, what I tried to explain is more the modalities that are open to them rather than just because a lot of them want to get somewhere. They maybe are stuck up on, I don't like AA or I don't want to go to rehab or I don't want. So like I try to open more doors and just have conversations about what's out there
Right.
and then try to get them to a place. And then once they're there, whatever that place is, a smart meeting, a Holly Whitaker book, or, Annie Grace's podcast or, whatever it is, talk to them about what they're
Or
getting
your podcast.
or my podcast. Yeah. And, and then, how is that working for them?
Right.
I also do try to think about each person and really individually, like what was their backstory? What was their actual, using period looking like? Maybe, we talk a little bit about, are they going through a divorce or, maybe they have issues with their kids and maybe there's some bigger problem that like AA alone wouldn't help.
Right.
How do we get them to therapy? And I can help them kind of get to like a resource to help them find therapy or inpatient rehab or,
Well, so
outpatient.
let's talk about that because I'm always one of the reasons I do my podcast is very similar to your own. I want a bigger reach. I want it to be highly accessible to people. I know that there is a financial disparity in our country between where people are and the cost of services today, right? So much of your podcast is about sobriety by design, but also or sober by design, excuse me, but also focusing on the mental health, the journey, that growth aspect. So how, when people are financially disadvantaged, how do you resource support for them? What's out there? and what can people look for if they're looking to receive potentially a coaching service like yours?
Yeah, so again, like in my county, I live in Sussex County. We have the recovery center that I work for. Uh, s- so in there, we offer free coaching.
Awesome.
They also have therapy options there, and we have a patient navigator that will help people kind of work within their means to find resources. So if it is a inpatient rehab, they'll work with, maybe their publicly funded insurance. And then there's a certain, you know, listen, you see the rehabs on TV that look really fancy. Like those are very costly. Those are costly solutions. They are
And hard to get in.
hard to get in. There's not a lot of beds. And even the ones that, we can get for public assistance are very hard to get in right now. It is a bed limitation, but there is stuff on all sides. I also know there for therapy resources. Again, just going back to my mom, when she died, she actually took her life.
Mm.
And that kind of opened my eyes up to suicide. And
Right.
through that, real quick, we became involved with an organization to write love on our arms, and they support a lot of just you know uh, therapy and mental health access. So we donate a lot of money and whatever we can. If there's like a birthday or something and people do these fundraisers, it always goes to them. And
Yeah.
and when my brother died a couple years later,
Mhm.
anything that we did, they
Wow.
like went to the same organization. And if somebody's struggling with mental health, they can call there and they can get help through that organization. There's
And
like,
we'll share that in the show notes.
yeah, there's
So
just
please.
organizations like all over. I think at this point there's probably every county has an organization through like their social service at the county level. And then I don't really know how much New Jersey has as a state because I don't deal with the state much. But
Mhm.
then there's those national type organizations that, are private, but they're helping people find a path.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
you know,
and I think that the piece here is to hold on to that part where there's a little bit of desire on the individual's end to desire this change,
yeah,
to reach out, or if not, have someone in their corner to be like, I'm calling this place for you. I don't want to gloss over the loss of your mom in such a tragic way. Thank you
yeah,
for sharing that. Gosh, that would create a lot of trauma 5 years ago.
mhm,
And that makes me think. So to kind of shift topics just slightly,
mhm,
not even slightly, but to your mom, right?
mhm.
So your mom, you're a child of an alcoholic, divorced, right?
Divorce.
Parents.
Yep. Divorced parents.
Mom finds sobriety. A handful of years later, she takes her own life.
Hmm.
That alone is enough of an external force, right? I can see where it would make you want to, like you said, manage those interior feelings with exterior things. Um, but when I asked you what you're most proud of, you said it was ending the generational trauma
Yeah.
that comes from that story. Why is that so important to you? And that's obviously a huge leading question, but what's the big deal about that we need to learn about how each of us as individuals is carrying forward our own generational trauma, even if our story is not as challenging
Yeah.
as the one that your mom and you shared.
Yeah, I don't know that it really was a thing for me up until it probably happened a little bit before my mom took her life. Um, but then really sort of hit home after.
Mhm.
Um, you know, like you said, every family has a story, right? Where they came from and how, you ended up on this planet, and we all tell ourselves a version of that story, right? There is the story and then the version that we tell ourselves.
Right.
And my version had always been one thing. Um, After my mom died, that got challenged a little bit. And and that I think that really kind of propelled me to say, okay, what do we do better for our kids? And at that point, my older son was in seventh grade, and my younger son he's 6 years younger, so he was in first grade, I think, or something like that. So young, but still had experienced a bit
Where?
of stuff. And really what I want to do is, I don't want them growing up with all the anxieties that I had, that my wife has from her childhood. And to do that, really, I need to fix a little bit of me. And so I go to therapy. My wife goes to therapy. We've tried all different modalities of therapy. Um, we're very open and honest in discussions with our kids about, you know, this is why I might have this behavior, and I'm trying to fix it, right? Like it, I'm not a fully enlightened version of myself. So like our kids are gonna have crap. They're gonna go to therapy. My
Right.
hope is just it's a little less crap than I had,
Mhm.
right? And like maybe their kids will be the generation, right? But like just looking back at my family story, like there's been some nonsense. So it just kind of carries through, right? Like if my grandfather was messed up, that probably means that his father was even worse, and so on and so forth. So like, I can say that I'm not nearly as like cranky as my grandfather. I don't hit my kids. Like there's things that we've just not
Big
done.
improvements,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
improvement.
and it's big improvements that take courage, right? Because to change that bond with the story, the person, the relationship means you have to sacrifice something else, just like going from being a drinking person to a non-drinking person. And I think how you said, like, I'm not a fully evolved person. Well, not yet. None of us are.
Right.
And
Right.
so help me God, if I don't evolve tomorrow, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So let me keep evolving. Let me keep learning and growing because, and what I appreciate about this is I've heard people say, I got sober and I didn't feel better. I wasn't happy, like life was still happening,
Yeah.
right? Because it's a yes and it's the sobriety and the managing of the rest of your life and not giving that much weight to it. I don't know if that makes sense, but being able to say, yes, I'm this, but I also am capable. This is not the only part of me. This is not the only identity. I'm also capable of dealing with my children differently, approaching my career differently, because I have found that we just want that magic bullet. And sobriety is not enough alone. It's the therapy, it's the working through, it's the good, social habits,
Hmm.
eating habits. So, what are some of those great tips and tools, whether it's how you sleep, how you eat, if you're journaling? I know you've done a lot of work in therapy. I've heard you talk about the tapping before. If you could give two or three tips and tricks to our listeners today about healthy behaviors, healthy mindsets that you use and work with your clients on to either help perspective or pattern.
Yeah, I think, over time, I think my big one has become community. I talked about it early on with, AA. And for me, that was like a community that I had at that time.
Mhm.
And the more I surround myself with people, the better I feel. And it's
Right
hard.
answer, by the way. We are a tribal creature. Our being is meant to be in community. And
And
I
it's
think that's
hard.
perfect.
Yeah, like I don't think our society is set up good for it now, and you need to seek it out. A lot of people are they think they have a huge community because they have 1,000 Instagram friends or they're on Facebook or whatever it is, and it's not the same. You need to be in a space with people and just, around them, and you get their energy, and the conversations are different. So I think finding a community, whatever it is, if it's a church or if it's your neighborhood walk group, um, some sort of 12-step group, a reading thing, knitting. I mean, there's tons of them out there.
Even committing to listening to a podcast where every week you're getting a similar message of you can do it. Here's some ideas, here's more community and collaboration. And it's just the willingness to show up in
Yeah,
those spaces,
yeah,
right? Like that for me is super celebration worthy, right? I show up to read the book, I'm showing interest. That means I'm taking one step further towards understanding where I am in the story so that I can rewrite it to a way that doesn't suck as bad as the original version,
yeah.
Like you said, make it less crappier.
I,
Um, All right. So community, what else?
For me, the second one I'm just gonna say, and because I just got back into it, is fitness. Like taking care of your physical being is super important. I had done it for a while. I stopped. I was kind of in and out of fitness for a couple of years, and I've just started again. And it is something that is just one, it makes you feel good. Well, you're sore afterwards, but you feel good, right? You feel like it's an esteemable act. You've done something for yourself. For me,
Well, and that's the before, during, and after, right? I
yeah.
know I'm not going to go into exercising and come out, maybe I'll feel like a goddess, but my whole everything's not going to change, but I still feel proud. I
Mhm.
still feel accomplished. Still feel a little winded, which I always kind of like. And it's the checking in and being aware, right? Working out is not always like the funnest of the fun, but the benefits, really, when we collect those benefits, outweigh the effort it takes to do it.
Yeah, and for me, like I'll have a bad day at work. I go to the class afterwards, and by the time I get home, I can't even remember why I was kind of in a bad way about work. Um, so I think there's something that happens mentally. Obviously, there's a physical
Mhm.
benefit. I want to be able to move around when my kids have kids. So for me, it's just something that I kind of let go, and was lucky enough to actually my family pushed me back into it because they're like, you are cranky. You need to get out and do something. And so that was a big one for me. And I think there's
I love the family feedback, by the way. Dad,
yeah,
you're cranky. You need to go to the gym
yeah,
or
yeah.
wherever it is.
We're very open here. We try to be open and we try to treat our children like humans, right? Like I don't
Good for
talk,
you.
they're very included in our nonsense
Mhm.
and but that's good, right? I think it's been maybe it's too much. I don't know. We'll see. Uh
Well, but it's a matter of how you do it at what age. I mean, in some of it they were exposed to, just because, which means we have to deal with it because these kids are hearing and seeing today more than we can even imagine. And if we try to gloss over it, they're going to make all their interpretations based on what's being shoved their way from YouTube and TikTok and whatever other snappy things are coming up in the pipeline. But we
yeah.
have to talk to them. We are their community. We have to give them community. And I know it's hard. My 9-year-old daughter doesn't always want to be in community with mommy's conversations, but it's my job to do that and to keep her in a way that she can be safe and make good decisions for herself, right? That's the generational trauma that you and I and every parent today has an opportunity to shift,
Yep.
right? And it doesn't always mean over talking everything,
No.
right? But
Yeah.
in whatever way we need to do that.
My kids are pretty good at telling me when I've talked enough. I just say, okay, I got it. Um, the
It's good
the
that you have a cue for that. Got it.
yeah. Sometimes it's not as nice, but yeah. Um, the other thing, and this one is just more a tool that I give to recoveries and I use myself, is like a very sort of detailed journal. So for me, like tracking out my day and my habits and then kind of balancing them out over what happened or how I feel the next day is important. So I have like every month I'll track, you know, 5 to 10 habits. And did I do them the day before? How did I feel the next day? And I set, a very manageable task list each day. Because sometimes in the past I had set unrealistic expectations of what I could get done in a day.
Yeah.
So, keep your task list down to, 5 things maybe. Um,
How do you do that? How do you prioritize in a world where there's so much we can do?
yeah.
And this is something I work with my clients on of, the an audit of how they spend their time, if you will. But how do you prioritize it? And maybe that's a list of top three things, or I don't know, how do you prioritize those 5 things each day?
Yeah, so the journal that I'm using now has like different tools. So there's a month planner, a week planner, and a day planner. So the month I lay out at the start of the month, and I have like the high level things that I want to accomplish in the month, right? And that could be, for me this month it was like make sure I signed up for CrossFit, make sure that I get, this room purged in the house, and whatever these high level things were. And then, obviously as time goes on, things shift, things happen. So that lets me recalibrate at a week level, right? I'm still always kind of looking back to the month, like, oh, did I get those major things done, right? So there's like a major thing at the month. The
Mhm.
week might be a little bit more dialed in, and then daily, it's like the little things that I can do to get done, right? Because daily things come up. So it's like, okay, like today I just got to go to the post office today, and like,
Mhm.
but then how does that then relate back to the week, to the month, right? So there's just like for me, it's the easiest way to plan out. I know it sounds super intense, but it kind of keeps your like I understand that if I don't get the room purged on a Tuesday,
Right.
it's still my month goal and I have, 15 more days, right? Like, and that's
Right.
okay.
Well,
So,
and I think that's important too of being able to look ahead and to reflect back because even if you don't get that room purged, if you can see that each day you were productive, you contributed, you brought value and success to your life or whatever, then it changes the weight of that top level thing, that purging. Maybe it wasn't the most important thing that month. Maybe that was a wish list item, and maybe that can be done next month. Or maybe, oh snap, we're gonna have to change our plans on Saturday because we got to get that room done, right? And it's if we're not checking in, whether it's how we manage our schedule, how we manage our dietary and consumption habits, how we manage our sleep, right? How many times do we look at our schedules and block out all the time and not account for getting a good night's sleep,
yeah, yeah. I
right?
have a Whoop strap, which is like a fitness tracker, but it tracks my sleep too. So
Oh,
like
that's cool.
I have that on there as well. So like I can
That's
see like
cool.
how much I slept, what type of sleep I got. That also then gives me a recovery score. So every day I kind of go into the day knowing like, okay, I'm like in the green zone.
Super
So
helpful.
yeah,
You'll have to share the link for that so I can put it in the show notes.
yeah. But the journaling, and I think more so looking back a day is always important. Like, did I do the things that I know make me feel better?
Mhm.
Because then that is going to show up in the next day. So for me, like for this month, it's like, no sugar, reading, time
Mhm.
with my family. I used to literally track like time with each family member because at some point I thought, okay, like this is too sweeping. And
Right.
so like I'll even adjust those things over time. And
Because
for
life
people,
changes,
yeah.
priorities and availability and needs change.
And I say to like my recoveries, it's like five things. If you can like say these five things, if I do them daily, make me feel good, you're in a good spot. And then like the next month it might shift to another five things. Like you might realize like, reading is like not doing it for me, so maybe it's something else. And then you can like swap in and out, but
I
play
think
with it.
what's so important there is the next day, the feedback, right? Because I'll track, oh, I got all my boxes today, but what is the effect of that,
Right.
right? Did it matter? Did it work? Or was I just spinning my wheels in 15 routines?
Right. Did you still
Uh,
feel crappy the next day? Right. Or did you go into that day feeling like a 10? You
yeah,
know, because if you feel like a five and then all those things don't matter, you
it's
need
not
to
working.
recalibrate those five things. They're not the right five things.
Well, and I think that goes to the constantly evolving piece. If we're not checking in on what is and is not working, right? To go back to I spent a lot of years very proud to be that strong drinking girl, and then I became embarrassed by it. If I wasn't checking in on how I felt about that, I can't do anything, right? And now I'm dealing with shame and guilt and all manner of things. So I like the reflection, I like the focus. We can't make everything a priority, and we cannot change every perceived good or bad behavior in our life in an instant, right? It takes time. But what I hear so much is that when people are willing to approach sobriety and whatever their thing is, it feels like a trial in the beginning and at the end it feels like a triumph. Am I right? Am I hearing that right? Because I see even though sobriety doesn't change everything day one, getting that clarity and doing that work is a triumph. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's, I kind of say it's parenting is the hardest thing I've done. Like that, just
For
finding
sure.
my recovery and sobriety was definitely the hardest thing. Um, it's a triumph for sure, something I'm very proud of. But it wasn't like a magic cure for everything. There was a lot more to it. Um, and I think you said it before, like life goes on and all these things happen in and when you're drinking, like you drink when you're not feeling good, you drink when you're happy, like you drink for anything. And now I experience life like fully all the time.
Mhm.
So when good things
That's a
happen,
huge triumph. Let's
yeah,
be real.
like I get to experience the good things and they're like I'm there for all of them, right? Like every concert I've been to since I've been sober, like I can remember. And but then like every bad thing I remember just as hard, right? So like and I'm experiencing it like in that moment, there's no escaping it. It's like I just need to live through this.
Mhm.
And for me, it's like if I always do this thing like I play a tape of like, okay, this sucks, but if I drink this will happen, that will happen, that will happen,
Gonna
and then
suck a
I'll end
lot
up here.
worse.
Right. And it
Yeah.
just sucks worse. Like there's never a version of the story where it's like it ends well.
Mhm.
So that's in those really, really bad moments, which I've had, right? Like
Yeah.
again, the loss of my mom. A couple years later, we had COVID, and then my brother died in the middle of COVID. And then,
Jesus. Sorry.
and then my dad had a brain aneurysm, and then my dad had a stroke, and like, so like just all these
Good
things.
Lord, Corey.
Yeah.
Hold
So
on. We got to hold all these people real quick. Whew.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So, those things happen.
Hmm.
And what I know now is like if I let myself just kind of dissolve into drinking or whatever, like I'm not gonna be there for myself, my family, or my friends, I'm not gonna be able to go
Yeah.
have, breakfast with Chris and like be there to help him. And like I think that that's the important thing is just realizing I just gotta keep going and drinking or, falling into whatever other addiction isn't going to help. That doesn't mean like I'm perfect. Listen,
Oh gosh, no. None
I
of us
ice,
are.
I've been on some good ice cream benders and I know I am doing it. And it's sort of this idea of like, okay, it's not the best thing, but it's not the worst thing.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the balance that I gotta
That's,
live.
I mean, and the reality is we're gonna have extremes, right? We're gonna want to eat the ice cream. We're gonna want to spend the money still. But are we aware of what we're doing and why?
Mhm.
Right? And that's the power. That's the power to say I'm choosing, actively choosing my life based on this pause, this moment of, well, I could totally have that drink because my mom, my dad, my brother, my everyone is, tragic. And if I do that, I end up down this road where guess what? In 2 years, I'm gonna have to deal with all this shit anyway. And so the awareness to say pause. I could choose easy for right now, or I could choose a little bit harder for right now that has a better long-term effect.
Yeah.
And I think that's where working with a coach, having someone like you in that individual's corner with the accountability, with the community, with the tools, that's what we all need in whatever aspect of life we're struggling with, whatever the addiction, whatever the mindset. So it makes me wonder. So you started this podcast to get a bigger reach, right? To,
Mhm.
to touch more opportunities. And I always listen to someone's first podcast, right? I listen to where they are today, then I go back to the first one and start catching up in between. Your first podcast was with your wife, and it was highly vulnerable, wide
Mhm.
open. My first podcast was with my cousin, and I chose her and our content so that I could try, in this space, highly vulnerable, but I was still nervous as all get out, right? But yet you show up on day one with your wife and you bared it all. How important is vulnerability to you as a coach, as a person going emerging through recovery, living with recovery in this way to just now put yourself on the podcast? That's a big deal.
Yeah, I guess as a coach, I don't do it the same way, right? Like as a coach, I'm a little bit more guarded, because I always fear comparison
Mhm.
in that space, right? And the one-on-one, it's very easy to compare, me to them. Um, you know,
Especially if you didn't end up in the ED, right?
right.
Like you didn't hit catastrophic space. So they could
Yeah.
be like, well, you don't understand.
Right.
Right?
I
Is
try
that
to
what you're
find,
saying?
yeah, like what I do is I try to find like a through line rather than an exact match because it's never going to happen. Like my story is not going to be the same as theirs.
Right.
And in that early space, it's easy for somebody to say, well, you have no idea what I've gone through because that person feels so unique in
Right.
their story. Like they're the only person on the planet that can get it. And that's just where you are at that point.
Right.
So for me, it's different in the one-on-one coaching. So how I share my story with people in that space is a little bit different. I share, that I'm in long-term recovery. I share that I'm a coach, that I've done this for X amount of years. I share the basics.
Right.
Um, if there's something that they say that I think I can kind of build a rapport off of, I might dive into my story a little bit. But again, not, I say long-term recovery. I don't even tell them how long because like I don't, again, like
It's
I
not a
don't want,
competition,
right. It's
but
like,
we
yeah,
tend towards that, well, he must be better than me, or
right. I don't want them to go like 12 years and they'll go like, I'll never get 12 years. Like this is useless, right? Like, so
hmm,
there's like a way to tell it in that space. On the podcast, the way I look at it is like I'm broadcasting out, hopefully to a larger audience. I don't know who I'm talking to. And I feel like vulnerability is something that people can connect with, um, you know, real quick.
hmm,
Uh, when I listen to podcasts, some of the best ones that I've listened to are the most vulnerable, right? Like there's an episode of Dak Shepard's Armchair Expert, and I love Dak Shepard. I love
yeah,
all his podcasts, but when he had his setback, and he spoke about,
I listened to that episode.
killed me, right? Like that was the episode where I was like, okay, I get it. And like, you want to reach out and hug the guy in that moment. And so for me, like it's just telling my story as bluntly and as open as I can. And obviously we don't share everything, but we share a lot. And for, in episode one, it was like the way I looked at it is like, well, I want to just check out the technology and make sure this all runs
Yeah.
smoothly. Who is open to me screwing up the most? My wife. And
That's
so
great.
like yeah, and we had a lot to talk about. We've gone through a lot. We've known each other since we were
Yeah.
18 and 19, and we've been through tons of things together. And I'm sure we'll be through a lot more. But and we've been through therapy. So like having the hard conversations, we've done it already.
They're already out, right? It's old news between the
Yeah.
two of you. So why not use it to the better, accessibility for your audience? And I'm thinking I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the first guest on the Armchair Expert was his wife, Kristen Bell.
It was.
So I
Yeah.
think I think you guys are in alignment here on a couple of things.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. His vulnerability to say I totally screwed up and let me tell you my story. It was very powerful. And I think the more we show up and say, I'm screwed up too,
Yeah.
but guess what? We can still move forward. We can still function. We can still reclaim authorship over our story. And we don't have to hand the pen to the alcohol, to the substance, to the thing that's holding us back. Um, so one of the things I want to ask you about is another tool, maybe I'm projecting here, but as I understand it, music is a
Hmm.
big deal for you.
Yeah.
Has music, tell us how you love music, what you love, but is there a part of music that's been supportive to you in this journey with sobriety?
Um, yeah, so music is a tool for sure. Um, but just to step back, like, music was in my house growing up. Um, I lived with my mom and my stepfather most of the time. And there was always music playing. We had a CD player like as soon as CDs were a thing, and then we got the changer as soon as those were a thing. And like, there was more music on
Right.
than TV at an early age. And it was, um,
Awesome.
I think I went to see Bruce Springsteen when I was like 7 at
That's
MetLife,
cool.
well, at the old Giant Stadium. And so music.
Jersey boy's dream, right?
Yeah, I guess. But music was always just a big part of my life growing up and just kind of continued on. Um, and all types of music. So, and then my wife and I, that's like a common bond for us. So we
Mhm.
go to a lot of live music shows and we always have. I'm constantly challenging myself to find new music. My brother, he works in the music industry.
Oh, cool.
So it's just part of who we are. How I use it as a tool, for me, a lot of songs just, and I'm sure this is true for everybody, there's like a time stamp on them in my brain. And like if I want to kind of connect with a certain time period and how I felt in that time period, I can put on a certain type of music or a
Yeah.
certain artist, and like I can just kind of go back there really quick.
So
And
what would your music of this time period be?
right now, so right now I'm probably looking at Noah Kahn, um, probably Goose, and Run the Jewels. So
Okay, I'm gonna
pretty
have to
diverse,
check them out.
right? So I have like hip hop, I have folk, and then I have Goose, which is like a jam band. But like those three, I think are the ones that I kind of tend towards right now. But like if I really want to go back, I would probably listen to like REM or Counting Crows, and then that brings me back to like high school. And then if I wanted to get to grammar school, I would go to like a Tribe Called Quest. If I want
Yes.
to go to college, it's different. There's Matthews and
Yeah, yeah.
Third Eye Blind, and there's like certain little points,
Yeah.
and some of it's not even the best music. It's just a point in time.
It's the
Uh,
story that it tells. It's the dot on the map that
right.
puts you
Right.
in
And
place.
yeah, and if I want to think about my mom, I'll put on like Bob Schneider. And if I want to think about my brother, it's the Grateful Dead, or and there
Oh.
or Humphreys McGee, or there's all these little points in time. Um, so yeah, it's just a tool for me to kind of travel through time, actually.
Mhm.
Um, and then now in the mornings I've taken to like starting my day off just with like a classical music. So it's
Mhm.
like an ease into the day, which is kind of nice.
That's
So
great.
yeah.
Okay, so what about what books? What books do you recommend? Do you read? Do you gift often, whether it's sobriety related or not?
Yeah. So books are a tough one. Just trying to think what I do. So let me look here. I got a bunch. So the one that I read the most recently was Essentialism by Greg McCowan.
So
Um,
good. Oh
so
my
good,
gosh. Oh
right?
my gosh. It is so good.
Yeah. So my therapist recommended that one. She started out one of our last sessions. She's like, I started reading a book, and she's like, I thought of you immediately. So I bought it, and
Yep.
I kind of blew through it. Really gets into the prioritization
Yep.
thing.
And
Kind of,
that's kind of like the question I asked about, right? Are we dealing with the trivial many or what is it called? Trivial many or I don't know, the important few, however he delineates those. But I think when we look at life as everything is important, then nothing is important. And where he's really going is put your time and energy into those things that actually matter, right?
yep.
Relationships, the experiences, the 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 places our brains go when we listen to music versus have a glass of wine,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. For me, she really recommended it because of my professional life, and like my job has me scattered.
Mhm.
I don't have one priority. I have 10, and they're all super high importance, and I don't love it. Um, I think it can get better. I just think it's part of our work culture, and reading the book, there were so many examples of that. So like if you're struggling with that professionally, like read the book and
It's so good.
just I think for me it was one of those moments of like, oh, I'm not unique, and then I can just start to go like, okay, there's got to be a solution. And there were in the book. From a recovery book standpoint, Annie Grace, This Naked Mind is one that's pretty easy to read and kind of tackles recovery in an accessible way. She has some good tools outside of it. So I kind of always recommend that to people that I work with. Um,
And you've referenced her a couple of times, so I'm gonna have to check her out. Thank you.
yeah, Holly Whitaker's book is good. Again, Laura McCowan has a couple books out there that are all very, um, I think they come at recovery with the new mindset of not that, uh, it they call it patriarchal. I just it's like the dogma of it is more, I think, what
I
it
was
is
gonna
for me.
say there's a stigma, and this is something we neglected to go to earlier, but there's a stigma of where I would want to be celebrated if I came out and said, I have decided to be sober.
Yeah.
Instead, we put those people we tend to put people in a corner and shame them and say, well, what were you doing wrong that all these other people who are still drinking seem to be managing?
Yeah.
Well, we go back to that confirmation bias, but we should celebrate these people for saying they're doing something good,
Yeah.
right? And not say, well, go to a dark basement to a meeting and bear all your stuff, right? But it's to be lived out loud. And I will say, I believe wholeheartedly, and whether it's Holly Whitaker or any of these other authors, that stigma is changing,
Yeah.
right? Because now there's people like me that can be sober curious and say, do I think I'm a full in this categorical way, alcoholic addict? I don't know. I know that I'm addicted to parts of the relationship, but I don't want that, right? Because I don't want to be stigmatized. I think we're changing that and making it a little more fluid of where are you on this journey and where do you want to go with it? And is it working for you? Because now because I've started exploring non-alcoholic alternatives and all these, my Facebook feed has changed. It's no longer, it's all the elixirs and the apothecaries. And because I'm sober curious, I still want to be exposed to that social, emotional body feeling some, but I also don't want to be committed to alcohol. I don't want to be out of my not controlling mind, but my conscious,
Yeah.
deliberate mind. Um, so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I think we're not just polarizing into drinkers and non-drinkers, sober and non-sober, alcoholics and non-alcoholics. I think they're creating this spectrum in between where we can just get on the journey train.
Yeah. I think it's just this idea of you could be there's a version of you that is whole, and then there's a version of you that is kind of, you
Mm,
know, less than ideal, right?
yeah,
And that looks different for everybody. For me, it just my life can include alcohol. Like I get
yeah.
that. And I don't foresee a future where it does.
Mhm.
And but like, my wife, she drinks, she'll have a glass of wine. Her relationship with alcohol has changed over time.
For sure.
Um, you know, uh, I had my best friend, he was a drinker. He stopped about a year ago. He just one day woke up and now he is big into the NA beverages, and he'll send me pictures of whatever he's drinking. And like it's just, I think everybody gets somewhere in their life and they realize they're not on the path that suits them best. And if
And there
that
should be no
means
judgment in that.
right. And it's like if it's like the harm reduction thing, right? Like if you were drinking 20 drinks a night
Right.
outside in a bar, and then you decided, okay, this isn't safe anymore because I'm driving home after 20 drinks. I'm just using like an example, right? And you decided that you're going to do that at home from now on. Good for you, right?
Right.
Like you've taken away some amount of harm for your life.
Yes.
Like you've recognized something, you've changed something, and your life is actually better.
Better for it.
Right. Now, does that person then take the next step and, reduce to 10? Maybe. I don't know. But like, I'm not here to judge that path.
Yeah.
That's not my job.
But I
You know?
love that you're giving people an invitation to their path, to their direction, and to give them that space without judgment, right? That we can be curious about what's best for ourselves and that we have resources and people in the world who are willing to help us and just say, well, why? What do you want to do with that? How do you want that to go?
Yeah.
And then to hold us accountable through it. And I think that the work that you do as a coach, I know the work you do in your corporate world is very important to you, but the work you do as a coach and the work you do to communicate these opportunities to the world through the podcast is incredibly important. We are in a space where mental health is a big issue, and it's not just an issue for the individual household, but for our businesses, right? When you show up to work, are you mentally stable enough to perform the job at hand?
Right.
Um, it's affecting us in so many different ways. So, like you, I'm like, how do we get good news out there, good opportunities, good resources? Because we all want to grow, we all want freedom, right?
Yeah. I wish it would be more in the workspace. Maybe at some point
Yeah.
we'll get there, but
But and it's getting there slowly, I think. But it takes these conversations, it takes the willingness, the vulnerability to say, this is my experience. What can we do to make it better? Can we have non-alcoholic beverages at our cocktail party?
Mm.
Can we make sure that we, just like we make vegan options or vegetarian options today, can we have these options to not other this group of people who's doing a Herculean thing
Yeah.
and changing their life?
I did that at my last big corporate event.
So cool.
Used or I leveraged my position in the company to just say we need more than just water, you know?
Yeah,
And it was there. And the funny thing is, there was plenty of people using them,
that's
right?
awesome.
Like, which was
It's
great to see,
we won't take advantage of an opportunity if the opportunity's not in front of us
right?
or if we're not invited to it.
Yeah.
So to that end, that it's not quite yet in corporate, and I love Tim Ferriss, the podcast.
Yeah.
He always asks the billboard question. So assuming all your other interests are covered as far as marketing, and you could have one thing on a billboard for all of the world to see, what might you say?
That's a good one. Never really thought about that. Um, I would think don't be afraid to change.
Mm,
Because I think, you know, once you start changing, it becomes easier. But so many people get stuck up in the idea of, again, like they are who they are, right? And if you change, you're going to lose something or lose people. And I could just say, like, out of all the changes that I've made, because like once you make the first one, more come, right? Like you know this. It's like the first one's the hard one, and then everything else is gets easier and easier.
right,
Um,
because you have data to verify that you can do hard things,
yeah.
you know?
I could say that I've never lost anybody that was really meaningful. I've never lost an opportunity. I've never lost anything from changing. And so yeah, don't be afraid to change would be the thing that I would say.
I
Because,
love that.
there's always something better on the other side of it.
Mhm.
That's what I found. Very rarely is it like, oh, I did that and it's worse.
Well, and that's the changing the trial into a triumph,
Yeah.
right? And Seneca is quoted as saying, "We suffer more often in imagination than we do in reality." And having someone like you, a podcast like yours, for people to hear these stories, these testimonies, these attributes that get a person from "I can't do it" to "what if I could." I think that's the best way to go today. It's the most attainable way and it creates a relationship. So I hope that people listening find within themselves a willingness to be curious, not only about the sobriety towards substances, but like myself, their sobriety potentially towards Audible and podcasts or towards shopping or towards scrolling the internet. Just stop and shoot. Why? What are you getting out of this? Is it sustainable? Is it helping you? What is it taking? Because every time we say yes to something, every time I say yes to a podcast, I'm saying no to something else, whether it's quiet time or conversations with a friend or sleep. Everything is an exchange. So I love that you've given us tips and tricks and tools to take that step and to take that step towards change because I truly believe we're all worth it and we all have the power within ourselves, given the right conditions, the right support, the right motivation, to really make those changes. So I thank you for the
Oh,
work that you do.
thank
How
you.
how can we follow you? Can you tell us where to find your podcast? What's the best way to get more information on Sober by Design?
Yeah, so my podcast, the Sober by Design podcast, is on all the platforms, Apple, Spotify. I'm sure there's other ones
And
that
all
I'm.
the others.
Yeah,
There's a whole list of them.
Spotify seem to be the two big ones
Yeah.
that everybody that listens. I think Pandora is one. My wife made me put it on Pandora because
Because that's where she listens.
yeah, she won't use Spotify. But I'm
Yeah.
on all of the streaming platforms, and then I'm on Instagram at the Sober by Design, or I think I'm just Sober by Design on Instagram. Um, Again, you can connect with me. I share um, sort of everything on there. You get to see who I am,
All
what
the
I'm doing,
things.
and yeah. Again, thank you very much for having me on. I think
You're
it's great what
welcome.
you're doing, and I'm happy that we were able to connect
You too.
through my day job. and do this because it's important for people to know that there's a better way to live, right? And that's what you're doing, and that's what I'm trying to do. I just, you know, I think how we live as a society right now is a little bit off, and I think we could be doing better. I really do.
I
Um,
agree.
I don't know what that better is, but it's not what we're doing currently.
Well, it's, to go back to what you said, it's a life that's less crappy, that sucks less,
Yeah.
right? And it's not going to be the government, the big anything that's going to make these changes for us. It's small steps
Yeah.
within ourselves. But if we don't know that that's an option, that there's an alternative, that there are other people out there, like you said, who aren't that different from us, right? That my really unique, special, combustible story is not all that different, even if it's not the same amount of time or the same impact, because we're all in this together. And if we don't start crossing those lines to create more community, to your point, it's not going to get any better. You
Yeah,
know?
no. I think it's we're at a point right now where we really need to focus on it because it's going to be super easy to just, dive into your own world that you create on your phone, tablet,
Yeah.
computer, whatever your device is, and you can create a life that's really appealing to you.
Mhm.
And then one day you're going to look up and realize like there's nothing there for you. It's a little bit alarming.
And
And I
that's where we have to go back to. We can't be afraid to change because
yeah,
change is the only constant. And if we balk against that, we're going to be fighting a really relentless battle. And
yeah,
that's not what we're here for. We're here to live freely and to live openly and joyously.
yeah.
So, Corey, I very much appreciate your time and the work that you do in the world today. And for those listening, go check out at Sober by Design on Instagram and across the sphere. Even if you're not ready to go sober, it's beautiful stories of people who are turning their trials into triumph. And I'm grateful that you do it. So thank you so much for
Thank you very
joining us
much,
today.
Michaela.
All right. And to everyone else, I hope you make it a great day, and we'll catch you next time on And All the Things. And that's a wrap on another episode of And All the Things. If you enjoyed today's show, please like and follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If you really liked it, please go ahead and rate it. Then think about who in your life might also need to hear it and any of the other episodes we have shared. Then share it with them. When you find something meaningful, something valuable, you've got to share it and pay it forward to those you care for. Thanks for joining us, and follow along on Instagram at MyJoyCoach to see more of me, your host, Michaela Burdyshaw. And as always, make it a great day.